sweethearts. Happy Wednesday. It's not just any Wednesday today. Today is extra special because it is Earth Day. So, Earth Day is a day that we not only think about what we love and appreciate the most about the earth and about nature, but also it's a great day for us to think about things that we can do as kids and for myself as an adult, things that we can do to keep the earth clean and beautiful for years and years and years to come. So, in honor of Earth Day today, we're going to read The Wump World by Peet. It's a super fun story that talks all about how important it is for us to protect the earth, and I hope you like it. The Wump World was a small world, very much smaller than our own world. There were no great oceans or lofty mountains or giant forests or broad sandy beaches. The Wump world was mostly green, grassy meadows and clumps of leafy green trees with a few winding rivers and lakes. But it was the perfect world for the Wumps, who were the only creatures living there. There's the Wump world, and it looks a lot like our own. There's way more land, though, than we have. The Wumps were simple grass eaters that spent most of their time grazing on the tall, tender grass that grew in the meadows. In warm weather, they cooled themselves in the crystal clear rivers and lakes, and at night they slept under the shelter of the bumbershoot trees to keep the dew off their backs. Since the Wumps had no enemies, they wandered around just as they pleased with nothing whatsoever to worry about. However, the Wumps would have worried if they had known that someone a million miles away was watching their little world. Things are about to change for the worst for these Wumps, sadly. One morning, the Wumps were awakened by a far-off humming sound. It seemed to be coming from somewhere above, and as the humming grew into a heavy roar, the sleepy-eyed Wumps crept through the trees for a peek at the sky. Zooming straight for Earth came a great flock of pot-bellied monsters with tails and fins, spitting fire and shooting out streaks of black smoke. Do you think those are really monsters? Find out. As the monsters swooped down to land, huge legs sprang from their bulging sides, and like gaping mouths, doors flew open, and then ramps shot to the ground. Down the ramps came a horde of tiny creatures swarming out onto the meadow. These were the Pollutanes from the planet Pollutus. They had left their worn-out old planet to start a new life in a new world. After such a long journey, the Pollutanes were overjoyed to find themselves on solid ground once more. Not monsters, spaceships. They were all prattling with excitement as they followed their leader, the topmost Pollutane and world chief, across the meadow. At the top of the hill, the chief stopped for a long look at the surrounding countryside. Finally, he said, "Looks good. We'll take it. Plant the flag, Sergeant, and let's get things going." Look at the air above those spaceships. Uh-oh. One shrill trumpet blast brought giant machines thundering out of the yawning spaceships, rolling down runways and out onto the meadow. The timid Wumps had been watching warily from their shelter in the trees, and at the sight of the giant machines, they were horrified. I would be horrified too. You can tell that big changes are about to come to the Wump world. "Wump, wump!" they cried. And in a wild-eyed panic, they went humpity-clumping off through the trees to go diving headlong into the nearest cave. Then down they tumbled, head over heels through a twisting tunnel to end up huddled together in dark caverns, while the earth-shaking machines rumbled and roared high above. So they're safe, but they're not where they want to be. Once they got started, the monstrous machines moved at a furious pace, gobbling up trees and grinding them to bits. More giant machines flattened the ground, followed by great scoopers and scrapers and diggers and gigantic cranes. Soon the entire Wump world was overrun. busy little pollutanes kept their mighty machines going full blast day and night without letting up, in a frenzy to improve their wonderful new world, which didn't need to be improved, just my opinion, but the pollutanes saw things differently. Suddenly, great cities sprang up, huge factory buildings with towering smokestacks, high-rise apartment buildings, and tall, tall office buildings, and above them all loomed the 100-story skyscrapers. Oh no. Along with the buildings came a tangle of streets and freeways with on-ramps and off-ramps, overpasses and underpasses, jammed with trucks and buses and cars of all sizes, rushing in every direction. It was one great turmoil of noise and confusion, and there was still more to come. Meanwhile, the poor Wumps remained underground, wandering aimlessly through the caverns, feeding on fuzzy green moss growing on the ledges and the mushrooms that were clustered in the crannies. They were sipping the sweet water from pools filled by underground springs. They were very unhappy. For all they knew, they might have to spend the rest of their days down there. The Wumps didn't dare venture up to the surface, not even for a peek. They were much too frightened by the endless rumblings and roarings and loud screechings coming from above. It was growing noisier every day. So the Wumps are safe. They have food and they have water. But they are very unhappy. Very, very unhappy. There was more and more noise and more of everything. More buildings with more smokestacks, puffing more and more smoke. More freeways with more traffic shooting out more and more clouds of exhaust. More trash and more trash piles with more and more waste gushing into the rivers and lakes. It looks awful. Remember how green it was? Pretty soon, the cities were so clouded by the factory smoke and the fumes from the freeways that the pollutanes could barely breathe. They went sneezing and wheezing about the streets, grouching and grumbling and blaming one another for the awful mess that they were in. So now the pollutanes who made the mess are not happy either. One day, an angry crowd gathered outside the World Tower building, demanding to see the World Chief. When the chief appeared on his balcony, all of the pollutanes began shouting at once, "We can't breathe the air, we can't drink the water, and we can't stand the noise. We've had enough." Achoo! Sneezed the chief. "I know just how you feel, and something will be done at once, I promise." Let's see what they decide to do. With no time to lose, the chief called for a meeting with his 3 topmost outer spacemen. "Gentlemen," he said, "this world of ours has gone sour. We've got to come up with an idea. We've got to get out of here quick. But first we must find a whole new world, a better one. That's your job, men, so get going." "Righto, Chief," barked the men, and within 15 minutes they were at the spaceport aboard their spaceships. Then Zerouche, the men took off in 3 directions, and in seconds they were zooming about in outer space at 7,000 miles an hour. So they've decided, this world's not good for us anymore. Let's go find another one. Another one they can destroy. Days passed with no word from the outer spacemen. After waiting a week, the World Chief flew into a rage. "Blast it all!" he bellowed. "What's keeping those blithering bubbleheads from coming back?" Then one Monday morning, out of the dark, smudgy sky, swooshed one of the spaceships. As the ship touched down, the man hopped out shouting, "I've done it! I've done it! I've found a new world, a bigger one, a better one." "Nice going, lad," cried the World Chief, and the crowd gathered at the spaceport gave their hero one great rousing cheer which ended in a fit of sneezing. They're They're going to go somewhere else, it seems like. In no time, the great news was sent flashing around the world over radio and TV, warning all pollutanes to be packed and ready to go within 24 hours. At dawn the next day, the entire population swarmed into the Space Center and crowded aboard the giant spaceships. They're all leaving a big mess behind. After double-checking to make sure that all pollutanes were accounted for, the world chief gave the signal for blast-off. With a thunderous roar, the giant spaceships shot off the ground. Kazoom! Up and away through the smoke-blackened sky, and they were gone. And at long last, peace and quiet settled over the Wump world. The sudden silence came as a shock to the Wumps. They could hardly believe their ears. Still, they wanted to take no chances, and so they remained in their caverns with their ears listening for the slightest sound. After a long, long silence, they decided it was time to go, and led by the biggest Wump, they crept up the tunnel to the cave entrance to find that it was covered by a crust of cement. With one powerful push of his snout, the biggest Wump bumped his way through. Then, one by one, the Wumps waddled out onto the freeway and gaped in wide-eyed amazement. They had feared something awful was happening to their world, but this was much more than they could ever imagine. They were staggered by the size of the huge buildings, with walls and windows looming up every side, and the broad layers of hard, flat crust covering their earth, which felt strangely cold on their feet. There was no sign of any tree or any tuft of grass. Even the sky was gone, and the Wumps wondered if there was anything left for them, and they decided to find out. They wandered the freeways for miles and miles, only to find more and more buildings with endless heaps of wreckage and rubble. For all they could see, their world was completely ruined. Footsore and weary, the Wumps were about to give up and head back for their cave when the biggest Wump let out a joyful Wump! Found something. Just ahead of them was a grassy meadow with a clump of bumbershoot trees, all that was left from their lovely world. Wumping for joy, the Wumps went bounding off the freeway and out into the meadow. Pretty soon, the hungry Wumps were munching away on the tall, tender grass. Now there was a new hope for the Wumps. So there is a little bit left over for them. In time, the murky skies would clear up, and the rains would wash the scum from the rivers and lakes. The tall buildings would come tumbling down, and the freeways would crumble away. And in time, the green growth would wind its way up through the rubble, but the Wump world would never be the same. And that's the end. So it's not ending quite as happily as we're used to, but it is ending with hope. So let's think about everything we can do. Just as one person, what can we do to help our Earth stay beautiful for as long as possible? We'll talk about it today during our video chat. I love you, and I will see you later. Bye!